Good morning, everyone, and welcome. For those of you that are not familiar with me, my name is Robin Budish. I am the Director of Transit Choices. Our mission is to advocate for an equitable, efficient, and reliable multimodal public transit system in Baltimore and throughout the region. We are really happy that you are joining us this morning because we have two very informative and relevant presentations to bring to you from the Maryland Department of Transportation and Maryland Transit Administration, as well as Baltimore City Department of Transportation. Before we get started with our first presentation, I'd like to just talk a little bit about housekeeping for a moment. If you would please be sure that you are on mute, check your devices. It's just out of respect to both our presenters as well as the attendees to minimize distraction. And our format is as follows. After each presentation, we will open the floor to questions and comments. You may either raise your hand or you may put your comment, feedback question in the chat, and we will get to as many as possible regarding how much time we've got left. In any case, you will be receiving both the presentations from today's meeting as well as the recording. So with that said, I would like to welcome our first presenters, and it is my pleasure to introduce Allison Scott. Allison is the Light Rail Modernization Program Director with the Maryland Transit Administration, and Jamie Richardson, who is the Light Rail Modernization Program Deputy Director, also with Maryland Transit Administration. Their presentation is titled MTA's Light Rail Modernization Program. So Allison and Jamie, the floor is yours.
Right, thank you.
Did it work? Sharing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thanks, Jamie. So as Robin mentioned, my name is Allison Scott. I'm the director for the Light Rail Modernization Program, and Jamie, my deputy director, is also with me today, and we'll be walking through this presentation. So on our agenda for for the day is to go over our program overview for those that aren't familiar, as well as the benefits that the program will bring to Baltimore and the region. We'll go over the partner coordination that we're doing alongside the project, as well as our planned schedule right now for the overall program. So what do I mean by the Light Rail Modernization Program? Our existing light rail was built in the early 90s. In 2024, we did win a rail vehicle replacement grant to modernize our existing light rail fleet. So that existing fleet we have had since the light rail opened. It did go through a midlife overhaul, but in round numbers, vehicles need to be replaced about every 30 to 40 years. So we're in that time frame. It is a once in a generation opportunity for us to improve the system. As we said, pretty much these overhauls only happen every 30 to 40 years. And this is our time. It's worth noting that it goes beyond the vehicle. So this program is an investment in the signaling system, our traction power upgrades, and maintenance facilities, as well as some track and stations modernization. So it is truly along the entire light rail. The 2025 Moore Miller transportation budget out of the legislative session added additional revenue that was able to fully fund this billion-dollar program. So we're very thankful for that money to be able to move this program ahead. So why modernize it? As I noted, we haven't touched the system really, other than some little spurs and little improvements here and there since the initial construction. And so things that we're frequently experiencing, as I say we, because I do live in Mount Washington and I take the light rail downtown to work. And so I experience these things, which is long headways. Sometimes our vehicles are out of service for maintenance or have to leave the line because of issues, often because of either vehicle crashes or other incidents. We have some vehicles out of service for repairs. Additionally, our line was built at the very beginning enactment of ADA, and we know that we've come a lot further since then. And so while we currently meet the requirements for ADA, the high blocks that people have to use it's very time consuming, it's stigmatizing, and also it takes time for the operators to have to come out of the cab and put the ramp down to have people come on. So making it new ADA accessible with level boarding will absolutely help that. And then we also know that we struggle with signal delays in the downtown corridor that we're going to work with the city to try to optimize as part of this. So what does our scope include? Right now, our scope is 4 different projects. So the first one is replacing those vehicles with fully accessible modern low floor vehicles. We will also be upgrading our maintenance facility. So we're going to start at our Cromwell facility where our new vehicles will come in for testing and commissioning. We'll be upgrading as I said, our traction power substation. So we have 26 of those. That's what gives us the operating power that runs to the catenary to power our trains. We'll also be upgrading our train control system in the project with the vehicles. And then finally, we'll be upgrading our stations for accessibility by removing those high blocks, as I noted. And we're going to be upgrading amenities and making sure that the stations are fully ADA compliant when we're done. We're also looking at some targeted improvements associated with this, although, as always, we have a budget that we're working with. So one of the ones that we're going to be addressing is the existing Baltimore Arena station. Doesn't exactly meet ADA. We do have some tight constraints there, but we think we can get a platform in that meets ADA and keeps all of the other requirements there. So that's one of our goals, is to improve that station. We're also looking at the Lexington Market Station and working with the city there to see if we can do some operational changes that could benefit transit as well as just the blocks and some foot traffic. We're also looking to reduce some of the light rail and vehicle conflicts. As we know, just engineers, left turns are the highest rates of crashes between vehicles, pedestrians, transit vehicles, just in general. So if we can eliminate any left turns, especially when they're not frequent, to avoid crashes, that will improve our operations as well as safety along the line. And we're noting here that some of these improvements, really don't have to wait for the light rail modernization. So we are actively trying to work with our city partners to see what we can advance earlier. So as I noted, I think just trying to understand and capture big what we're trying to, our benefits of the program or the goals that we're going for is, improving the accessibility. We want to increase our frequency and reliability. So if we can be more reliable, and we know that we have trains coming and they aren't being pulled in and out of service, then we can actually increase frequency, right? And be delivering more trains and cut down on the headways. The faster boarding times will also really help with that. We can't spend minutes waiting for people to get on. If we can get that down to 30 to 60 seconds, then again, we have the ability to add more trains to the line and increase service. We're looking to improve the traffic safety and operations. We're looking at some enhancements at the stations, both with lighting and some CCTVs to enhance some of the security. And we're looking to have a refreshed and modern update to our stations and wayfinding signage as a part of the program. A couple, I want to touch on, 2 of those and how we think we're going to, reach those goals. So I've mentioned the improved accessibility. This is a really big feature. I truly believe this as a mom of 3 kids who used to have strollers. We're out of that, but, have bikes. And kids that want to get on the light rail with their bike and go to places. It will be great for people to be able to wheel right on. The boarding and alighting will be way more efficient when people can go even with a stroller or a bike or a wheelchair. Any of the doors in the middle will be accessible. And then climbing the stairs just takes time. And if you're trying to get a bike up the stairs today, it's very, very difficult. So we're excited that the low floor will, will save time and just the physical strain it puts on people as our population ages to climb stairs inside a transit vehicle. So we're estimating that those shorter dwell times along the entire system could save us 7 to 8 minutes, which is pretty substantial. One of the other things like that we're trying to, those program benefits that we're trying to get out of this is decreasing the signal delay that we're seeing for the vehicles, right? I think as somebody who rides transit as a transit professional, there's kind of nothing more frustrating than getting on your train at the station and then immediately pulling up to a red light, 15 seconds later. So we're looking to improve those situations. We're also looking to remove those left turn movements and optimizing the operations where we can. We think we could maybe save 1 to 2 minutes of travel time just along Howard Street by just changing some of those movements and signal timing. And we know that the safety benefits of removing left turns are across the board for drivers, for the trains, and for people walking. So we are looking to continue to partner with Baltimore City DOT on improvements that we can make along the Howard Street corridor. I'll turn it over to Jamie for how we are advancing our partner coordination.
Thanks, Allison. Good morning, everyone. Jamie Richardson, Deputy Director for Light Rail Modernization Program. And I'll talk a little bit about the partner coordination we've been doing so far on this program. Oh no, this might have been out of order. I don't know what happened, but I'll talk about it's part of partner coordination as well. But one place we've been, doing partner coordination and somewhere that MTA can't do itself is some of the increased station area investment. So we know that the light rail is an economic driver for the region, and station area development can be catalyzed by transit investment, and that's what we're doing as part of this program. So we've been working with the city and other partners, and specifically our partners at the Secretary's office, for just a shared vision for a revitalized Howard Street in the CBD, and planning to do stakeholder engagement through planning, design, and construction. Just thinking about, what could the station area look like in the future at some of these locations. So how have we been doing this partner coordination? We've started an interagency work group with ourselves, the MTA, colleagues from the Secretary's office, and then colleagues from different city area agencies, so Department of Transportation, DPW, planning, housing, and then other partners such as Downtown Partnership and some of those city adjacent agencies. So we really started this in the beginning to make sure that we're reaching timely decisions during design and construction, to keep our schedule and coordinate on a shared budget, that we keep to that. Because I'm not sure if we've mentioned yet, but all of these projects are alternative delivery. And so we're really going to be trying to move quickly. And one of the ways that we can move quickly and mitigate those risks is just getting to quick decisions. And we're hoping to do that through this interagency work group. We also want to proactively identify and mitigate construction impacts. So, we're working within an existing corridor, and working within an area that has existing foot traffic and businesses. So through this interagency work group, we'll be able to just identify and mitigate any construction impacts and make sure that the word gets out. Also making sure that we're coordinating effective stakeholder engagement. So there's always lots of projects going on in the city or in the region at the same time. So just making sure that we're coordinating on the jurisdiction level, to make sure that if someone's, at DPW talking about a project a street over, they know what's happening with the light rail modernization program, so folks can kind of get the information at one place. And then also just aligning parallel efforts. This is more of a long-term project for us, so we're just trying to make sure that anything happening, specifically along the Howard Street corridor, but even at all of the places where the light rail crosses or other projects might be crossing the light rail alignment or different station areas. We just know those projects are happening, so we're able to inform our contractors about them, and really work towards a kind of dig once mentality for the corridor and alignment. And I highlighted two efforts on the right of we've really been coordinating with the city's Downtown Rise effort, because that really kind of complements and speaks to what the light rail modernization program will do of having investment downtown. And then the city's Department of Planning recently led a Howard Street visioning public meeting in February that I attended as well as a colleague. So the city is really taking that lead and effort on what kind of the future of Howard Street and downtown looks like, and we're a partner with them in that. Specifically with the city and the center agency work group and the city Department of Transportation, we're coordinating with them regarding the station improvements, and then also light rail and traffic safety, as Allison mentioned, a lot of just how the vehicles interact with everyone else in the right of way. And specifically with the city, we want to align agency programs. The city does a lot of annual work on ADA with curb ramps and upgrades, and also their repaving program. So as I just mentioned, with a kind of dig once mentality and putting those projects together, we want to try and align these efforts on Howard Street so that when we get new vehicles, that's also the time to, all right, curb ramps are new and we're thinking about what are those exact repaving limits. But as we had a meeting a few weeks ago and someone mentioned, repaving and potholes also don't have to wait for our longer term program. That's something the city is always looking to do. And coordinating with stakeholder coordination as well. Of city has lots of day-to-day contacts that they reach out to and work with within the business community or neighborhood associations. So it's really important for us to coordinate with the city so that if anyone comes to either of us, we're able to answer questions and give good information. And then I'll talk a bit about our schedule for the program. So as Allison mentioned, we have 4 projects, also referring to them as tranches in the public sector. And each of them, as I mentioned, are a form of alternative delivery. And right now we are in solicitation or procurement for all of these projects. So our first project, the vehicles and train control, that's going to be design, build, transition management. So it's actually in market right now. And as the vehicles are, really the main part of this program, that contractor will also be responsible for some of the transition management of just how do we kind of go from the old vehicles to new vehicles. So making sure that our maintenance staff is prepared for that, and just making sure that we're coordinating with all the other projects too, because our vehicles will have a very specific height and width, and that needs to inform, okay, this is what the stations will look like, and the Cromwell maintenance facility has to have all the equipment in place for said new vehicles that we'll have, and then just making sure that the traction powered substations are ready in time to power said new vehicle. So project 2 is our stations and track project. Replacing the track in the central business district is also a big highlight of this project. And this project, we're doing a progressive design build delivery model. So it's interesting that with all of these, the contractor who's going to do construction will be on board at the beginning. But with progressive design build, we'll really be figuring out what exactly the project is with them and how to build it at the beginning. And then we'll kind of agree on a price and an exact scope and go from there. But one of the challenges with the stations and track project is kind of how do you build this thing? In what order do you put things? So we'll have a period where we'll have both vehicles running as the new vehicles start to come into service and are tested and accepted. But we don't have exactly enough to run a whole fleet. So that how that all works out will really be a puzzle for us to figure out with the contractor and then with the city as well, just how we replace the track and how that works with what season we're in. Is it Oriole season? Is it Raven season? What's the best time to have kind of an impactful work? So that project is also currently in market. And then our third project, as Allison mentioned, our Cromwell maintenance facility will also be a design build project, and we're getting ready to get that in market. And that project is actually our critical path because we need the vehicles to be delivered somewhere. So we'll need a new building and more space for those vehicles to be delivered. And then, as Allison mentioned, our traction-powered substations are our final project, the fourth project. And it's also in market, but we have received some information there. So our timeline, we're really kind of at the beginning, even though it's, we've already been working on this for a few years with receiving the grant and kind of getting the pieces in place, but we're at the beginning of this longer term effort. And in the solicitation and procurement phase, as I mentioned, we're hoping to award most of the contracts this year and getting through those final paperwork stages early next year to have contractors on board with notice to proceed and then working through those design stages. So summer 2027 will really be a busy time of Cromwell should be under construction by then. We'll be thinking about how do the stations get set up to have both vehicles at one time, and the vehicle should be in their kind of assembly production. We're hoping to get our first vehicle by the end of 2029. And then there's a testing period to make sure that everything works on the vehicles and we pass our safety certification. And as I mentioned, then we'll have a transition period where we have the existing fleet and the new fleet coming into service. So that will be a period of time before we then receive enough new vehicles that we're getting ready for to really modernize the whole program of new vehicles. We're getting our stations ready to be ready for just new vehicles. And then we'll be able to add those additional amenities for the station's ultimate condition. And then, of course, with all these projects, there is a warranty period for some of the parts and the vehicles. So while things might look done on the street, Allison and I will not be done with the contractors of continuing that warranty period. And by that point, it should be 2034, which is hard to imagine as a date to say. And of course, this is our analysis as of right now. We're in the procurement solicitation phase. So as part of that, the contractors will give us their proposed schedules. So we're excited to see how this evolves and getting partners on board and kind of committing to a schedule for the program in the region. And that's my last slide. Anything that I missed, Allison, or you would add to?
No.
Great. Well, thank you so much. If you would be so kind as to take the slide presentation down, just so I am able to see the gallery, I would appreciate that. Before we open the floor to questions, comments, and feedback, on behalf of Transit Choices, we want to commend you both and, MTA for the commitment to delivering this project. We believe that it's certainly a critical investment in our regional, transit future. We also believe that it's going to restore confidence in public transportation just by improving, reliability, which in turn will improve the lives of thousands of riders. So thank you both for your hard work. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, Allison, welcome back. We are so happy to be working with you again and look forward to continued collaboration. So with that said, I'd like to open the floor to questions or comments. Do we have Anna?
I just was wondering whether there's going to be any shutdowns, either partial or full shutdowns, while all this work is going on. Because it seems like there's a lot of transition in this.
Yes, I can take that. Yeah, as Jamie alluded to, I think the nature of this delivery method, which is new to us as an agency, this progressive design build, means that we're going to be able to work with the contractor to kind of develop a plan for what service disruptions, probably multiple plans, right? That we will be able to, I think, work with the community on what's acceptable, right? We know from the initial double tracking of the existing light rail that doing a full shutdown, sent riders away that never came back. So we have to learn from, those lessons and make sure that we aren't, doing complete shutdowns unless it's absolutely necessary or like speeds up the work by 80%. So I think we're going to do some of those trade-off analyses when we have the contractor on board. But there will, the rail replacement downtown will absolutely require a shutdown to do that work. We want to try to limit that as much as possible. That's why Jamie said, I think seasons and when that's appropriate will be necessary. But
I guess my other question is about the existing cars, since obviously they're going to have to last a lot longer now. I mean, since we're talking years before, we get all this in place. I mean, I know the last I understood was that we had, out of 52 cars, we had 30 that were available on any given day, generally speaking. Are we still continuing to work on those cars to kind of get them back on track?
yes, they're still a part of that maintenance. And I think there was a supply issue at one point with some of our truck motors. So that's being resolved. Will we ever, I think a couple are being fully decommissioned. They won't come back, some of our accident ones. So I don't think anticipate getting up to the 50, but we're in much better shape, honestly, now. We need about 19 to 20 to run a full service. So being above that, and we are going to be working to maintain those. Yes, we know it's actually going to be very critical, but that's also why the mixed fleet will be important too. We know that our vehicles are in, dire need of replacement. So we want to start using the new ones as soon as they are safety certified. But we will be maintaining them to keep them safety certified until our new ones are ready.
Thank you. I'm glad this is well underway.
Rich?
There we go. Well, thanks for this tremendous presentation, and this looks very hopeful. Just want to circle back about transit-oriented development. In conjunction with this, we're going to be making light rail more attractive. Are there any plans coordinated with this for transit-oriented development, particularly in some of the northern suburbs of Baltimore?
That's a great question. We actually are partnering with our friends at the Secretary's office. So the Transit-Oriented Development, I think it's the Office of Real Estate and Economic Development, ORED, and TSO is leading Transit-Oriented Development. So we have flagged for them, as these opportunities, and we're going to continue to work with them on investments along the light rail. Right now, I think they're focused on the metro, right? Because we just got new cars on our metro line, and we have some owned land, some state-owned land, but I do expect there will be a parallel effort to accompany the light rail. And I hear there are some changes in Baltimore County, maybe on the thoughts and feelings around transit-oriented development, which could go a long way.
Okay.
Jamie, do you have something to add?
I was just going to add that while it's the legislative session, I know that the Secretary's office has transit-oriented development has also been a focus there. So it's definitely something the department overall is looking at, especially with these investments in the systems.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Allison and Jamie, very, very much. We are now going to move to our, Jimmy, did you have a question before I move
I had
on?
a comment.
Sure.
I just want to say, as a consumer, you get on the light rail and go somewhere and get off, and you never really think about all the work that goes into making that trip possible, all the planning, all the operational concerns. And at Transit Choices, we've just been so impressed by the staff at MTA on all levels, their professionalism, their desire to do a good job and make the system the best it can be. And I just want to compliment the whole staff at MTA because we are continually impressed by them. So thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Thanks. This will be a team effort for sure, and already has been.
Wonderful. We are now going to move to our second presentation. It is my pleasure to introduce Brett Thorne. He is the Chief of Transportation Services with the Baltimore City Department of Transportation. And our new, I think I can still say our new Baltimore City Harbor Master, Mike McGeady. He is also with the Baltimore City Department of Transportation. And their presentation is titled Water Transit Strategic Plan. So welcome, Brett and Mike. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Robin. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to request sharing permission so I can bring up my slides.
Permission granted.
All righty. Let's see here. Okay. Are we seeing that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, good morning. As Robin mentioned, my name is Brett Thorne. I'm with Baltimore City DOT, working a lot on our transit programs, especially the Harbor Connector and Charm City Circulator. And I'm joined by Harbor Master Mike, and Mike can introduce himself if he wants.
Yeah, hi, good morning, Mike McGady. I'm your harbor master. My office is under the Rusty Scupper downtown. And we'll get into all of the different roles that I'm into in a few minutes. Thank you.
All right, so we appreciate the opportunity to be here. We're just going to kind of touch on some stuff related to the Water Transit Strategic Plan, as Robin mentioned, starting with kind of what is a Water Transit Strategic Plan. We're going to get into a little bit about how the Harbor Connector fits into that. Obviously, touching on the Harbor Master, Mike's going to sort of talk about the relaunch of that office. And a little bit about our focus on maritime infrastructure and kind of making sure that we're keeping our waterfront infrastructure in a state of good repair. And then we're going to close with just some kind of highlights from the plan, some key priorities and recommendations. So to start, what is the Water Transit Strategic Plan? So this is actually an update to a plan from about 11 years ago, which funny little synchronicity. In 2015, when the city was doing the original Water Transit Strategic Plan, DOT Director Veronica Macbeth was actually leading the Transit Bureau at the time and led the original Water Transit Strategic Plan. And then she rejoined DOT in January of last year, and we happen to be getting ready to kick off the kind of 10-year update to this plan. So we're not allowed to do a water transit strategic plan unless Veronica is around. So this plan kind of touches on the Harbor Connector. We looked at sort of an operational analysis, do the routes which have been in service for about 15 years at this point, do they still kind of make sense? Based on shifts in sort of employment location and residential development, things like that. Are there things that we can do to improve the efficiency and kind of overall service delivery on the Harbor Connector? We looked at the Harbor Master office. As we mentioned, that office has been relaunched in the past little over a year or so. So are there things that we can do to sort of modernize that office and ensure that it's really executing its mission? And then we also kind of touch on inner harbor infrastructure and kind of keeping everything from, the obvious stuff like piers and docks, cleats, bollards, things like that, keeping that stuff in a state of good repair, but then also looking more holistically at infrastructure, and thinking about things like dredging, which we know is kind of a need every 4 to 5 years for the city. So how can we be a little bit more strategic, in our planning for kind of infrastructure maintenance and things like that? So to start with the Harbor Connector service evaluation, we are on Transit Choices, so I assume everybody here is familiar with the Harbor Connector, but just in case you're not, this is the Harbor Connector. It is the city's free maritime transit program. It consists of 3 routes. We have Harbor Connector Route 1, which is shown here, kind of ping-ponging back and forth between Locust Point and Maritime Park. That is by far our highest ridership route. And we will kind of touch on that a little bit more in a bit. Then we have Harbor Connector Route 2, which is Locust Point to Canton Waterfront Park. That route also ping-pongs back and forth. That is our lowest performing route in terms of ridership. And then Harbor Connector Route 3 goes back and forth between Federal Hill and Pier 5. The service operates Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. And it is a very seasonal kind of service. So what we typically see is that in the winter months, like starting in December through about February, ridership tends to dip a little bit, and then starting about right now, and then through kind of the nicer, warmer months out of the year, we see ridership kind of increase pretty significantly. So shown here is annual ridership on the service for the past several years. I think the thing that kind of always sticks out on these kind of graphs is the obvious COVID dip there. We went from, in 2019, a little over 330,000 people using the service in the year to a little under 90,000 during COVID. Obviously, there were major service reductions and things like that. But what we've seen in the last few years is pretty steady recovery to the point where last year we're pretty much back in the same neighborhood that we were pre-COVID. So we're delivering about 320,000 rides last year, and we expect that number to continue to increase this year. This kind of breaks down the ridership a little bit more by route. So you can see Harbor Connector Route 1 is kind of the thing that sticks out to me. It's had pretty significant ridership growth over the last couple years. And a lot of that has been driven, we think, by employment growth in the Harbor Point area. I believe it was Morgan Stanley and T. Rowe Price opened new headquarters in Harbor Point last year. And as soon as those buildings opened and people started working in them, we saw ridership, specifically on HC1, really skyrocket. HC2 and HC3 are a little bit more modest, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple slides. So as part of the service evaluation on the Harbor Connector, we wanted to look at the cost efficiency, basically, of the service. So we broke each day down by kind of hours of day to sort of see, how well is the service performing very early in the morning? How is it doing in the middle of the day? How is it doing, during peak kind of rush hour periods? And you can see here, we're able to get cost per trip by taking the total amount that the service costs and dividing that by the number of people who are riding the service during that hour of the day. And you can see here, Harbor Connector 1 is relatively efficient throughout every hour of the day that it's in service. Kind of something that sticks out to me, though, is Harbor Connector 2 and 3, very early in the morning. We have very low ridership on those 2 routes very early in the morning. We obviously want to be good stewards of money, and transportation and transit funding is always tight. So we want to make sure that we're being responsible. So kind of this raised the question for us, does it make sense to be providing Harbor Connector service that early in the morning? So that was kind of a consideration that we had looking at this. But we were encouraged to see that the overall kind of cost per trip for the service is about $3.33, at least for this kind of snapshot that we took of ridership in April 2025. And that's a very good number. So I mentioned Harbor Connector 1. We've really seen ridership skyrocket pretty significantly in the past year. So as part of this study, we wanted to look at whether we're running into capacity issues and whether we need to think about ways to add capacity on this route. A new ferry boat, which we're actually in the process of working on a procurement for one, but those are not cheap. So it's not as simple as just, oh, we have capacity issues. We need to add a new boat into service. So we're kind of trying to think of creative ways that we can create more capacity. And what this study showed us is that, as we suspected, especially in the morning, leaving from Locust Point, those trips are shown here on the left. In the 8 a.m. hour, somewhere between 40 and 50% of the trips are at capacity. So that means, you get to the ferry landing, you're ready to go across the water to get to work or whatever it may be. And turns out there's too many people there already. So you need to wait for the next boat. It's a fairly high frequency service. This route is every 15 minutes. But that can be, that's significant, and we don't want people to have to be waiting that long for a trip to get to work. So we have the kind of on the right-hand side of this slide, you can see kind of the reverse problem in the afternoons, leaving from Maritime Park, getting back to Locust Point. During the 5 o'clock hour, we sort of have a similar issue where a fairly significant number of the trips are actually at capacity. So we're asking people to wait for the next boat. And so, as we're sort of looking at this analysis and all the data that we've collected, we're sort of holding these two truths, I guess, of really high ridership on HC1 specifically, and then we have pretty low ridership on Harbor Connector 2, HC2. And so we started thinking about ways that we can maybe address both of these issues simultaneously. And so we came up with what I hope is a good plan. So for Harbor Connector 2 is kind of the big change. You'll recall from the first map that I showed, it used to be just a straight line back and forth between Canton Waterfront Park and Locust Point. We've now changed it as of March 2nd to where it serves, instead of just ping-ponging back and forth between Canton and Locust Point, it now serves Canton, Locust Point, Maritime Park, then back to Canton. So it's operating in a loop, and it's doing that clockwise in the mornings, and then it goes out of service in the middle of the day when we saw that not as many people were using the service. And then in the afternoons, it comes back into service and it runs counterclockwise. That sounds confusing, but there's a kind of logic to it, which is that essentially running it that way adds additional capacity on these really high demand trips between Locust Point and Maritime Park in the morning, and then Maritime Park back to Locust Point in the evenings. And so it's been in service for about a week and a half. And, when you change something like this, it's a little bit of nerves of like, okay, are people going to be are people going to be mad at you for changing their connection to work and everything? And so far, the reviews have been very positive. We've actually seen fairly significant growth. This is a small sample size, but we've seen pretty significant growth on the system as a whole, and specifically on Harbor Connector 2 since making this change. So I guess to summarize the changes on the Harbor Connector, HC1 remains unchanged, so it continues to provide service back and forth between Locust Point and Maritime Park from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday. Harbor Connector 2 now kind of runs in this loop that I was just describing. And then Harbor Connector 3, given the kind of low ridership in the mornings, we pushed the start time of that service back. So instead of starting at 6 a.m., it now starts at 7 a.m. and runs until 8 p.m. And I think I'm going to hand it over to Mike here to talk a little bit about Harbor Master items.
Thank you, Brett. So the harbor, as we know, is most definitely a sustainable mode of transportation. It's been that way for hundreds or thousands of years. So the city had a series of port wardens, dock masters, all that. But in 2019, that was really the last time we had a dock master. So there wasn't really a holistic look at the kind of Baltimore City municipal infrastructure and getting people access to the waterfront. So in kind of rebooting the office down here, we made the kind of, and I think words matter. We kind of changed from dock master, which evokes, one person coming to one facility, to harbor master, which has a more holistic look at what's going on around the water. So we have 5,000 linear feet of municipally owned piers and 23 locations that are now available to transient boaters to come and visit the city and get off their boat, walk around, and visit attractions, restaurants. And we ask for that privilege. We ask some very minor fees that again would be used to address the infrastructure that supports that activity. So we have an annual set of rates that goes through the Board of Estimates. We do a review of the multitude of wharfage agreements around the harbor that impact access to the public, different riparian rights, different agreements that all have different terms. So it's a multivariable kind of calculus of use of the waterfront, who's paying for it, and where the money goes. So it's been pretty interesting history lesson at the beginning. So in that process, of course, we need to make sure things are safe. Inventory the state of good repair of the bollards, cleats, life rings, ladders, landings, all those things that make that kind of bridge that land to water interface. Also working on logistics for big maritime events. We, of course, have the Sail 250 Maryland and Air Show Baltimore coming this June, which previous large events like that in 2012 and 2014 had over 1 million people visit Baltimore for a week and generate 130 million in economic impact, both in 2012 and 2014. So we're looking to kind of replicate that success. Of course, Sail Baltimore has an annual visiting ship program where they recruit international tall ships from the naval attaches in DC. We are the closest deep water port to Washington. So a lot of embassies like to bring their tall ships here and then have diplomatic receptions on board and things like that. So we continue to recruit for that. And also reconnect with the kind of overall harbor safety committee that includes the Coast Guard and DNR and the Corps of Engineers, pilots, the tugs, all the folks that make us a successful port. Next slide, please. So these are the specific areas of Baltimore City municipal piers that folks can come and utilize. We have moved from what was kind of a cash and check system to an online reservation system. Folks can reserve their berth, be it for an Orioles game to, pay less money to dock and then walk up the street to the stadium, or to take enjoy a concert at Pier 6, or any number of activities that we offer, both in the Inner Harbor and then in the Fells Point Historic District. So this is kind of a view of our very unique promenade, which is almost 8 miles around our harbor. And DOT has a very big part in the maintenance of this. So as you can imagine, there are different agreements from different entities, different private developments, and they're not all consistent as to whom is in charge of the maintenance. So just keeping an eye on that and having a proactive plan looking forward. For example, right now we're into phase one of about a $4 million promenade repair project at the anchorage. And because that was originally built in the early 80s, the city had that maintenance responsibility. Moving forward, there are a lot of other agreements where the city does not have that maintenance responsibility, but still need to work with those partners to make sure that promenade is open and accessible. So one of the things that we looked at was also trying to increase access. There's a very kind of antiquated thing called Article 10 of the City Code that describes the authority and rulemaking for the waterfront. It literally refers to some language from the late 1800s sometimes. So we're in the process of modernizing that. And some of that may include some future mooring opportunities for visiting ships, both right around Pier 6 because of the concert pavilion, but also in the middle branch. So as far as infrastructure, the finger piers, for example, built in the 1970s, a lot of the stuff is nearing the end of its useful life. So DOT has a very strong partnership with Waterfront Partnership of Baltimore and Department of Public Works, but DOT really takes the brunt of the maintenance responsibility for bricks, walkways, electrical, lighting, carpentry, painting, dredging, and then all of the safety gear. So we're kind of taking a hard look at a lot of this deferred maintenance and trying to prioritize safety, but also things that would maintain access for the public. There's a dredging project right now going on, which is designed to kind of return our approach channel to 25 feet so we can get some of the bigger ships into downtown. And that, due to the kind of runoff that comes down the fall line just east of Pier 6, tends to create a hump of sediment that kind of a speed bump between two different sets of deep water. So we have to continually try to fund that, and it's tough with limited resources. But this is one of I think, the good stories where the city and the state partner to get this done, both from just the engineering and permitting side to the the movement of the dredge material into the state's placement facilities. That's kind of a graphic showing the red areas there being the ones that shoal or get less deep based on the runoff coming down the fall line. So there are a multitude of wharfage agreements around the harbor, and they, 10 years ago, generated, somewhere around $1 million in revenue to the general fund. Those have, they each have different terms and really needed a kind of holistic review. So we're doing that right now to see what makes sense for both from an access point of view for the public. What exactly can I use to offer to transient boaters based on the different wharfage agreements and riparian agreements around the waterfront. And this really started, with the urban redevelopment project in the 80s. So a lot of these areas, continue to support a lot of activity, but we want to make sure that these agreements are structured the right way and are generating income and that can improve the infrastructure. So in our review, we did come up with some key priorities and recommendations. So Brett, I'm not sure
There we go. I think the
Yeah.
harbor connector is first. So
Yes, sir.
yeah, just kind of summarizing a few of the recommendations from the plan. There are several, and at the end of this, we'll have a QR code and a link if you want to actually see the draft plan with the full suite of recommendations. But some high points here are, the conversion of HC2 from an all-day service to kind of a peak service. So we can put a check next to that one, and we're sort of monitoring how that's working. But that one has been implemented. Recommendation number 2 related to the harbor connector is kind of related to a grant that the city actually received a few years ago to replace some of the boats in the ferry fleet and to perform some improvements at the harbor connector landings. Unfortunately, that grant has been frozen by the federal government. So the recommendation from the plan is figure out how to make it happen still. So we are pursuing every avenue possible in terms of funding and trying to make that happen. And we do have a state grant to help with one replacement ferry, and we're looking at some local funding through the CIP to do some of the ferry landing improvements, but we still have a ways to go to fully execute that work. The plan also recommends launching weekend harbor connector service. I mentioned earlier the service currently just operates Monday through Friday. We did do a pilot with some weekend service in December that was really well received. So we want to keep working toward making that a regular thing. That, of course, is budget dependent a bit. And then within the plan, there are some recommendations for new harbor connector routes. So the plan obviously recommends kind of further study for those routes. And a few for the harbor master. And I know that we're getting short on time, so want to be conscious of that.
So we're looking at a review of the wharfage agreements for consistency of terms and the pricing involved. One of the recommendations is rather than have these agreements spread across a bunch of different agencies, BDC, Housing and Community Development, and others, that we centralize that management under DOT. We're also looking to take those funds that are generated by wharfage agreements and our docking revenues and have a more direct connection to the maritime infrastructure that supports those activities. So we continue to do a kind of interagency work group with the Department of Real Estate and Baltimore Development Corporation and Waterfront Partnership to prioritize maintenance and kind of have the best use of the funds that are existing in the capital plan. We do think that a more direct CIP appropriation for maritime infrastructure is warranted. Right now, the money, some of it comes from BDC's CIP annual number. But since DOT is more directly tasked with the maintenance, we figure we should try to control that fund. And also looking forward, a more proactive approach to repair and replacement for the life cycle of the infrastructure. Part of this certainly is what MC Real Estate and the redevelopment of Harbor Place is proposing. We're in the process now of reviewing design development phase documents and making some comments about the function of the waterfront. And we're looking at a couple of immediate changes, one of which would be to put a gate at the finger piers for security for this boating season, knowing that those finger piers get removed in the larger MCB plan. And then finally, the dredging idea seems to come around every 3 or 4 years. The federally maintained channel ends right around Domino Sugar, so the city is having to address some needs from that point westward to the west wall. So we are looking at what would be a several-year process and literally an act of Congress to try to move the end of the federally maintained channel to incorporate some of that dredging problem that we have frequently. And the city probably would still pay for it, but you would use the kind of federal contractors and their mobilization, and you wouldn't have to remobilize. So there would be overall some savings.
And that is it for us. And I do have, like I mentioned, the QR code here if you want to scan that to see a draft of the plan, and then also the link here.
Sure. Thank you
And we
so
can put that
much.
in the chat.
That would be great. And then if that's perfect, what I would like to say, to both of you on behalf of Transit Choices is that, we are going to continue to advocate for fully leveraging the harbor as a transportation asset, which we truly believe it is, ideally to make water transit an essential part of our city's growth and mobility. So we have been doing this since our inception. We will continue to do so. And we thank you both for your hard work and commitment to advancing water transit. I know we're running over, and I do understand if people have to leave us, but I would like to acknowledge Jamie.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah, I'll try to keep this brief. My holy grail for the harbor connector, besides the weekend service, is having a route that basically goes from like Harbor Point to Harbor View, just across the harbor there towards like the heart of Fed Hill. And then also like a second place option for me would be like Harbor Point to Museum of Industry. Um, I think I think you guys have looked into like both of those. But I was just curious what the like verdict was on either of those routes and whether they're like feasible.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Jamie. We, like you mentioned, we have looked into both of those. We're kind of on the same page with you. We think those would both be really valuable, just in helping connect people across the water. The Harbor Point to Museum of Industry area is, there's actually a map and a proposed sort of conceptual route within the plan. One challenge there is uh, property ownership, and the downtown sailing center has they teach people how to sail kind of in that whole area of the water. And so the idea of having transit running through there raises some questions. I don't think it eliminates the possibility, but it's, a safety consideration. If you're going to have people just learning how to sail, do we want high frequency transit kind of running through there? The Harbor Point to Harbor View option, the city actually does own a landing at Harbor View, but due to some property ownership disputes, as I understand it, that far predate my time with the city, we have not been running a service over there. But it's something that we're interested in investigating and are taking steps to actively investigate whether relaunching service there makes sense. So I guess both of those ideas are on our radar, and we're sort of studying them.
We have one last question in the chat, which is any thoughts to ferries, ferries to Eastern Shore for passengers?
So we are working a bit with the Anne Arundel County consortium that's working on a passenger ferry service that kind of operates all through the Chesapeake. We at this point do not have plans for the Harbor Connector to go out there. A couple reasons being, well, the main reason being that the ferries that we have in our fleet right now are not basically graded to go into water conditions past Fort McHenry. The conditions of the water change pretty significantly when you get out into more open areas like that. So a new ferry, a replacement ferry for one of our existing ferries might be $3 million. A replacement ferry of that scale might be double or triple that amount. So it's a funding question right now for us.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Jimmy Rouse, Transit Choices co-funder, to provide closing remarks. Jimmy, you're on mute.
Hold it. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I want to thank all our presenters, Allison and Jamie and Brett and Mike, for great presentations. Very interesting. I wish we had more time. But thank you all for coming and presenting, and thank those of you who are listening and attending these sessions, because your participation is actually an act of advocacy, because it helps us bring people to these discussions so we can have these kind of public discussions about our transit systems and how to improve them. So thank you for tuning in, for the people that are listening, and thank you for the presenters.
Well said, Jimmy. I echo your sentiments, and we look forward to seeing you all again right here next month. And I'll be sending out a save the date very soon. So have a wonderful day, and thank you again for joining us. Bye-bye.